As they say, can everyone hear me? Perfect. Eccellenza, benvenuto. Grazie tanto per la sua presenza. We're grateful to have Bishop Sanchez Serrano here for this wonderful conference, and grateful for all of you. I am also a little wary. My metaphysics professors here who taught me Catholic University. That's why I'm not going to be very long, so I don't get myself in trouble. As they say, open up your mouth, stick your foot in it. So I'm going to say words of welcome and a couple of observations, and you can move on to the plenaries and what I hope is a wonderful few days here in Houston. It is a genuine pleasure and honor to open this first U.S. conference on Thomas Aquinas, teacher of humanity, with words of welcome. I am grateful to the Pontifical Academy of St. Thomas Aquinas and to Bishop Sanchez, to the Center for Thomistic Studies at the University of St. Thomas here in Houston, and thus to Dr. Summers, its director, and to Dr. Robert Ivany, who is the president of the University of St. Thomas. Dr. Ivany, you may want to stand so people know who you are here. That's Dr. Ivany, our president of the university. And of course, also grateful to the John Paul II Forum with Dr. John Hittinger for their sponsorship of this conference. In a brief bracket here, I also want to express my gratitude to the Basilian Fathers who founded the University of St. Thomas and continue their presence and sponsorship. A great group of teachers, with all due respect to Aquinas' religious congregation, which seems to be well represented here today. Nothing against the Dominicans, but we're grateful for the Basilians here and the work they have done as teachers and their love of Aquinas. As the local shepherd of the Archdiocese of Galveston-Houston, the first diocese in the state of Texas, by the way, brothers and sisters, and for the entire state of Texas when it was founded in 1847. I want to welcome all of you who come from near and far. You honor us by your presence, by your thinking, and by your Thomistic spirit. Or in other words, a most hearty welcome y'all, as Texans are wont to say. I want to add a word of gratitude to our speakers and presenters and to generous donors who have helped make this conference possible. Sisters and brothers, the number of you who are from the United States and Canada would probably be large, but I understand there are also a number of you who come from Rome, Italy, Spain, Poland, and other parts of the globe. In coming to Houston, you have come to a city that truly is of the United Nations, an urban area that has become perhaps the most international city in the southern United States, and maybe throughout the United States, with its over 4 million people. In the Catholic population alone, which has doubled in the last 18 years, we count between 1.3 and 1.5 million Catholics. Why such a diversity of numbering? It's because we have so many undocumented immigrants, we don't know how many Catholics we have. They refuse to register. They come, but they're so afraid they don't register. Fascinating phenomenon here, just in that number. The liturgy is celebrated every weekend in between 14 and 16 different languages in our Catholic faith here. So we are truly a diverse and ethnically rich population. I have a big joke. I could open up 2 new parishes tomorrow morning if I had the resources. Though the most predominant communities of this ethnic richness are from Mexico and Central South America, we have some 70,000 Nigerians, 170,000 Filipinos, and close to 135,000 Vietnamese. Africa and the Pacific Basin are immensely represented in the Archdiocese, as well as Central South America. The international flavor of Houston makes it a natural place to witness a conference on St. Thomas Aquinas, a most international, I would say even universal, figure of thought. I have looked at the wide range of topics and discussions that are to take place in these days, and the very wide range manifests the remarkable relevance and resiliency of St. Thomas Aquinas and of the Thomistic tradition, thinking in conversation with the issues of the day, as well as with perennial issues of great importance. I hope that you will, despite normally our tropical weather, this is unusual, be able to see some of the sights in the city, have an adventure eating out in a remarkable international restaurant or other, and then finally, if you are able, to grace us tomorrow evening with your presence at the Saturday evening Mass for Sunday at our co-cathedral of the Sacred Heart, a few blocks away and only 5 years old. Out of extreme humility, I want to inform you that it is the most beautiful new cathedral in the United States. Some got that, not everybody. Okay. I have already mentioned a great range in the presentations for the conference. Much of today's breakout sessions tend to be, as I saw it, a little more philosophical, while a number of Saturday sessions take on a more theological tone. This already reminds us that though philosophy and theology, the roles of faith, of reason and faith in our humanity, are distinctive, they are not separated and mutually enrich one another. Certainly a fond desire and direction written to us anew in recent times by Blessed John Paul II in his encyclical Fides et Ratio and in his letter refounding the Pontifical Academy of St. Thomas Aquinas. In his own thinking, intensely philosophical, Blessed John Paul II showed how the theoretical and philosophical life has an essential place in our life today and a most important role in theological work. His renewed and personal use of Thomistic grammar and terms has been a spur to thinkers of many schools of thought. His writing presupposed a beautiful conversation with Aquinas, done simultaneously with the conversation of the great traditio of Catholic faith and teaching. I believe that John Paul II has been most helpful even to what I would call the Thomistic school of strict observance. May I also add that Pope John Paul II at moments expressed his displeasure at how many theologians tend to lay aside the beauty of the philosophical distinctions and analysis that only philosophy, and particularly Thomistic thinking, can bring. I think that his comments are still true, which says you have work to do. I want to offer just a few brief observations on the thinking of St. Thomas and this U.S. conference, and Thomas's contributions to philosophy, theology, to culture, to the human condition, and to its telos. I do so with hesitation and trepidation as I look out here at an assembly of many superb scholars and thinkers, which makes us all the more grateful in Houston that you are here. First, I want to take my bearings in my first observation from the feast day today. St. Luke, one of the four major inspired interpreters of the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, a gospel writer, an evangelist. Luke, an admitted second-generation Christian and not an eyewitness, produces his writing on the words and deeds of Jesus Christ, and he tells us himself, after study and research and verification by witnesses. He is similar to St. Matthew and to St. Mark, but surely he has his own distinctiveness. Like them, he records the truth of Jesus Christ and remembers Christ's teaching, his moral action, and his teaching on moral life and moral agency. St. Luke also writes beautifully, perhaps the most beautiful Koine Greek in the entire New Testament. It has been said as a legend that St. Luke was a painter. He certainly is a painter in words, and the attractiveness of Christ is made more alive in the prose of St. Luke than many other places. The hermeneutical philosopher Hans-Georg Gadamer has said that treatises invite understanding and narratives invite belief. The narrative of St. Luke is a testament to belief and exhorts us to belief, or as St. Luke declares in his beautiful prologue, a wondrous periodic sentence in Greek that is 5 long lines, that one has faith that is also parousia, assurance, conviction, and boldness. In the realm of moral agency and moral teaching, for example, All three synoptic gospels recall the lawyer's question to Jesus about the greatest commandment, one that receives from Jesus the answer of Deuteronomy 6, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength, followed by a codicil, love your neighbor as yourself. But it is only Luke who remembers the rejoinder from the lawyer, wouldn't you know it was a lawyer, about who has the status of neighbor. And this is followed by Jesus' recital of the remarkable parable of the Good Samaritan, a narrative within a narrative, and one of the most beautiful of the parables. The conclusion turns the tables on the questioner and on the reader and on the listener of Jesus' words, since he won't answer the question, who is my neighbor, but instead says, who was neighbor to the person in trouble? A kind of revolutionary way of reading concrete moral agency in the three figures of attentiveness or non-attentiveness in the parable. I bring this out because in this one section of Luke, truth, goodness, and beauty shine out so wondrously. The trilogy of the true, the good, and the beautiful is part of the classical treatment of the transcendentals and are not far from my mind as I think about this conference. The overarching themes of true, good, and beautiful, treated to be sure in these days in addresses and treatises, or at least treatise-like structures, are shining out in the various topics and reveal a metaphysical sophistication. St. Luke proclaims and invites belief in the Lord, but it is a proclamation not without some unspoken assumptions, dare we call them metaphysical. Your analysis will be of great help in allowing us to understand the humanum, the beauty, and the goodness of the gift of reason, while not laying aside the crucial dimension of faith. So that in your own way in this conference, what St. Luke means by parousia, the boldness and conviction, is alive. I have a few other observations. My second observation is an intense encouragement from the point of view of a local shepherd of a local church. Please stay metaphysical. One of the things I learned repeatedly from my professors at the Catholic University of America, that principles of being are not things, they're principles. It's one of the most brilliant insights of Thomas and scholastic thought. They allow you to step back. The reductionism in thinking today begs for an alert, robust metaphysical mind. I keep thinking of all the times I get references to moral issues in our hospitals, both Catholic and non-Catholic, and when you ask for what happens with the ethics board, what do they send you? They send you a list of protocols. I have nothing against protocols. They are important in our highly bureaucratized society. But sisters and brothers, when you go through the protocols and look for anything in them, there's no substance. It's a serious issue. And I'm confronting it, as every other bishop in the United States, when you deal with massive ethical issues on the treatment of the human person in times of great crisis in their lives. So, the Thomistic synthesis on principles is so crucial here, its metaphysical structure, that I beg you, for the sake even of the good of the church, stay alive to metaphysics. This leads me to a further observation on this. That is the formation of priests, permanent deacons, and pastoral ministers. A few years ago, a student in pre-theology studying philosophy after a degree in computer science, or perhaps we should better call it information science, spoke to me, and he spoke of his love for philosophy and its difficulty. Without any deconstructive irony, he said he wished that the philosophy professors would speak English. Now, there's some sage things at stake in such a comment. First of all, there is a need for a specific, sophisticated terminology. So he was not wrong to say he was going to have to step back and learn a little more. And I think that part is good. I would never ask for philosophy to toss away some of the excellent technical vocabulary that you have developed. Simultaneously, I beg and pray, find some ways to unpack it for people who've majored in computer science. There's a definite need for philosophical mind today among those preparing for priesthood. For some of the issues they face are not just theological, but philosophical. And the mud that is around today in many people's thinking wants to be clarified. And for that, you need a decent philosophical training. And the Thomistic synthesis is a beautiful one. At the same time, it may need to be unpacked. May I add along with that as you are dealing with that, you are in the best position to also, without losing the distinctive synthesis, to look at what's going on today. When people talk today to one another and even about the church, the place or time when something occurred carries a little more metaphysical weight than maybe it did at the time of Aquinas. And that's that historical consciousness problem. I ask you that you have the resources to be able, without losing the intense synthesis that is necessary, to address these questions. I find that important for my seminarians, and even more so, sisters and brothers, for those who are training to be permanent deacons. I have parishes in this archdiocese, if I may be able to lament and moan for a moment, that have 8,000 or more families. In order for us to even have a parish structure beyond 1 or 2 priests, we'll have 5 or 6 permanent deacons and 75 people on the staff. Now, a lot of those staff members are engaged in what in tradition would have been important aspects of catechesis and adult formation, and in order for them to do what they're supposed to do well, they need not only theological mind, they need some philosophical foundations. And from my point of view, that's urgent. Nowadays. They are of goodwill, mind you. I have to say in Texas, people are basically really Catholic, if they are Catholic. So we don't have some of the issues other parts of the country have. But they really need formation. So my next observation is, would any of you think that it would be possible to produce not just what the program of priestly formation and diaconal formation state? They give the courses that are necessary. I think that's great. But to even get more specific, how about somebody out of absolute charity doing a textbook that would deal with these principles, that would help those who are particularly in formation for permanent diaconate and some of our pastoral ministries? This is, to my mind, very crucial for the preparation for many. It's better in the priestly program than in others. It's uneven and it's episodic in the philosophical foundations. And so this is a plea from a local shepherd. I mean, I know you may have better things to do. Textbooks aren't always the most interesting thing to do, but that would be helpful. I have another observation. This comes from someone who my major is in patristics. That there is and has been in times past somehow a kind of a divide between those who labor in the field of patristics and those who labor in medieval philosophy and in Thomas and beyond. There's no reason why we should be so distant. And yet I discovered this and experienced this all the while I was studying patristics. Well, those people in medievals, all they do is syllogisms. Well, you know that's not true. But that happens. And part of this could be revived if those who, without losing your technical proficiency, would pay attention to how patristic Thomas Aquinas is. Now, admittedly, he didn't have as many of the Eastern Fathers, which I cry about, at his disposal. But he did know Augustine and Pseudo-Dionysius. And he has some marvelous things to say about Hilary of Poitiers, too. The patristic narrative structure of thinking theologically, with its emphasis on appearing and doxa and glory, is very much a part of Thomas Aquinas. I wish some further dialogue would take place on that. The regionalism of the United States, finally, of genuine biblical presuppositions in the life of the people is around, particularly in the South. As I like to say, even the atheists believe in God in Texas. And there's a reason for that. It's useful. That means that there is a structure of theological mind, very biblical, a little bit fundamentalist, that is presumed by this part of the country. And that should not make us indifferent theoretically with what is possible. When I first arrived here in Houston 9 years ago, the first people who wanted to see me was the Jewish community. After that, I got an invitation from, of all places, Houston Baptist University. a number of professors there were extremely interested in patristics, and even further to my surprise, had read and were interested in Thomas Aquinas. We should not overlook the possibilities of a biblical religion and faith and the role it plays in culture here. The Baptists still dominate this region, I assure you, even though we are now, as Catholics, 23% of the population. But that kind of dialogue and conversation, which I think would be difficult with Calvinists maybe, but it's not impossible. And in fact, there is goodwill now. This region of the United States, culturally speaking, though the elites may be a little hostile, is not in general hostile to religious faith and its role in the culture. I'll give you a final example of this regionalism and its import. 5 years ago, in September, Hurricane Ike visited Galveston and this area, caused massive destruction. 4 days after the hurricane, I went down to the city of Galveston to review the damage to our buildings. I walked into our cathedral basilica, which is the first cathedral, and there was 8 feet of mud in there. It was a mess. It was horrible. We still haven't opened it yet. But when I walked outside, there was a woman who had lost everything down the street in her store. She looked up on the top of the cathedral and she saw the statue of the Virgin Mary, and she said, "My soul magnifies the Lord." I couldn't believe it. Luke 1:56, whatever. There she was. Her first reaction to all this trouble is a biblically, spiritually, even emotionally reaction. It means there's a dimension of what I'd call faith culture still very much alive. I go down the street to Holy Rosary, the first African-American parish in Galveston. It had water and mud in it too. Across the street was obviously a Baptist woman. She came out of her flooded home, looked at Holy Rosary, and she said to me, "The Lord done deliver my soul from the miry clay and the watery pit." A good Baptist version of Psalm 40. That was her reaction. Sisters and brothers, the reaction of biblical faith to the experience of life is an open invitation for us to reflect, to synthesize, and to see that there is in our culture yet today great possibilities to speak to the culture. And there's no one more universal who can do this, to my mind, than St. Thomas Aquinas. At the end, my coda to this talk is a little comment about Thomas on prayer. Thomas Aquinas asked, by the way, I got out the treatise on prayer. I mean, it's about 18 questions. You read the one, you say, oh, boy, is this hard? And then you realize there's 17 more questions. So I abandoned that and just decided to make a comment. Aquinas is one of the people who says that prayer itself, though it's not just appetitive, it's part of the practical intellect. And it deals with oratio and speech to a superior, but it has reason to it. Prayer. What a beautiful thing to contemplate as you're about to deal with some extremely important and wonderful issues in the 2 days ahead. I can't tell you how honored we are in the Archdiocese of Galveston, Houston, that you're here. Anything we can do to be of help, I know that the Center for Thomistic Studies will do. Grazie tanto, Eccellenza. Thank you all for your presence. May it be a beautiful time. God bless.